Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephen. I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. I should say welcome or welcome back if you're an existing subscriber, or some of the new ones who have joined recently. Welcome. If you don't know anything about me, I publish 2 trilogies with Orbit Books, a duology with Angry Robot Books, and there are more books on the way. I'm traditionally published, as I've said, and that's the kind of thing I focused on: writing advice videos, Q&As. I've done some live streams with other traditionally published authors who are also on AuthorTube. I post 1 video a week. Typically, that's about all I kind of do. That's enough for me and enough for the people. I tried doing more in the past and it just wasn't worth it. The quality wasn't there, so I've stuck to 1 a week, and I think that seemed to work out quite well. I also run Headspace. This is a private writing Discord. This is for people who are thinking of submitting when there's an open door policy, or they're working on a book and they want some feedback and comments from other people on the forum. So we've got that set up as well, and there's a link down below, and it's part of my Patreon, so if you're interested, have a look at that. So today I'm going to do my holiday reads because I'm going on holiday very soon, and I thought I'd show you what I'm going to be reading and why. Typically for a week's holiday I take 4 or 5 books. At the moment I've got a book in hand which I won't finish before I go, so I'll continue reading that on the plane on the first couple of days. And this is Crowfall. This is the 3rd book in the Ravensmark trilogy by Ed MacDonald. I wanted to finish off this trilogy before I start the new one, which is not connected to this. Ed is a friend of mine. I love his work as well. He has a very distinct voice and style. His fantasy is not typical in any way. It feels very science fiction-y and horror and slightly Lovecraftian, with these beings that you don't know too much about, but the power and the scale that they things that they deal with compared to the ordinary people running around is quite terrifying. You get glimpses of this. So a really interesting trilogy. Really looking forward to wrapping that up. And then at some point in the future, I'll be reading this, Daughter of Red Winter. This is the 1st book in a brand new trilogy, and this is out pretty much when this video comes out. Within the next couple of days, it is available. So go and check that out as well. Really looking forward to digging into a brand new world and seeing what he comes up with next, because he's so good at doing something atypical and that's not your standard. Then I've got 4 books that I haven't read yet, and I will be taking them with me in the suitcase. And the first one of these is Malice by John Gwynne. And yes, some people are saying, are you only reading this now, Stephen? This came out in 2012. And yes, there's been a big surge of support for John Gwynne in the last probably 4 years, 5 years or so, and rightly so, because he's a fantastic writer. And as it turns out, I have read this, and I have read the 2nd book in this series, but The Faithful and Fallen, I should say. But I read it pretty much when it came out. Something came up, I don't know why. I was enjoying the series and I never carried on, and now it's been 7, 8 years or something like that. I just don't remember much about it at all. So I'm starting over, I'm starting afresh, and my goal is to read Malice and then read the next 3 books or 4 books in the series, and then move on to the next series later on. I don't read particularly fast, so I'll definitely read this book, maybe 1 other this year, depending on what else is on my TBR, but that's the 1st book on my holiday proper pile, as it were. The 2nd book on my to-read pile for my holidays is this, The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood, and it's the 1st book in a duology. I've heard really good things about this. It sounds like a really interesting series, really different. I'll read the back so you get a little bit more information of what it's about, and I'll have to look up the name, pronunciation of the character's name, because it's quite unusual. So it's Corway. Corway was raised by a death cult steeped in old magic, and on her 14th birthday she's destined to climb a mountain to sacrifice herself at the Unspoken One's shrine. Yet even as she prepares for death, a sorcerer offers her a new fate: leave with him and live, turn away from her destiny and her god to become his thief, spy and assassin. Together they could topple an empire and help re-establish control. And there's a little bit more, but I won't read the rest of that. So it really intrigues me. Everybody who's read this has just said it's really fantastic, and I'm not really sure why more people aren't talking about it. So I'm dying to get into this. And when I'm on holiday, there's no distractions. I've got blocks of time, just hours by a pool, to just chill out and focus purely and immerse myself in a brand new world. So I'm really looking forward to reading this one. The next book on my holiday to read pile is this, A Veil of Spears by Bradley Beaulieu. This is book 3 in the Shattered Sands series, and it's one of the most inventive and fantastic world-building series of modern fantasy that I've read in probably the last 20 years or so. His world-building is outstanding. There's different kinds of magic systems built then into the world. There's different layers to it as well because it's in a desert setting. And so he's kind of thought it through very logically and sort of thought about transport and food and infrastructure and then how they get around. And then layer on top of that is all the history of the world to do with these 12 kings, which is the title of the first book in this series, the kind of immortal rulers of the empire, as it were, and who are they and where they come from, and they've got different powers and, you know, potentially different weaknesses, and how do you take them down. And this series follows initially a main character called Shader, but then you get other points of view coming in, and every book seems to shift. It's never just, oh, the first book is this kind of thing and it'll just carry on in the same kind of way. It evolves. This series is constantly growing. You get glimpses of stuff in the first book and you get more information on the next book and so on, but then you get other things added in. So it's incredibly layered, it's realistic, it's, you know, obviously very fantastical. And of course, if you haven't read the cover quote from Robin Hobb saying breathtaking, then, you know, that kind of gives you a clue. She's a fantastic author who knows her stuff, who's been in the business a long time. If she says that about these kind of books, you should really be paying attention. I think he's a massively underrated writer and everybody should be reading this series, which is now complete. It's completely done. You can go out there and pick up the main series, and if you want even more, there are novellas set within the same world too. So that's the next book. The next book is Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, and he's a very well-known fantasy author, and it was just a reading gap in my history. I never got around to it for whatever reason. There isn't anything in particular. He's a really interesting author. He's done a lot of books, and he started off as self-published, and this is how this one was picked up, because this is actually 2 books in one. So when you read the back, it said he self-published the first of the books in the Rairia Revelations, and it became an ebook bestseller, and Orbit then picked that up and the other book and folded it together into the first one of these. They then went on to do, I think, a couple of trilogies with him, but then he's moved back more recently into self-publishing now that he has quite an established fan base, and he's bringing out all sorts of books, these sort of standard versions, that he's also doing like beautiful leather-bound hardback special editions of his latest books for those who want them, and they look absolutely incredible. But again, I just haven't read them for I don't know why, so I'll tell you a little bit about this one. They killed the king, they pinned it on 2 men, but they chose poorly. It's about Royce and Hadrian, one their mercenary partner and a thief, and it's them getting involved in this plot where to do with conspiring nobles, and they're hired to pilfer a famed sword, hence the title. And then there's a second book in there as well. So the 2 books are The Crown Conspiracy and, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Avempatha, I think, maybe. So it's nice in some ways that I get 2 books, 2 complete stories with the same characters set within the same world, but they're relatively short because the whole thing is, you know, 600 pages, 650 pages, and normally that's quite a good chunky novel by itself, and I'm favouring shorter books at the moment. Sometimes I just struggle with the kind of really chunky ones, but given that I'm going to have fewer distractions, this is also good. I'm just going to be able to kind of plough all the way through it. If I get through all of them, don't know. I've then got a bonus book which I'm probably going to take with me, and this is this one, Joyland by Stephen King. It's super short, as you can see, and it's one of the hard case crime novels. And this isn't something he started, this is something he was invited to, and the books are very pulpy. They're very different, and obviously because it's Stephen King, he puts his own kind of spin, psychological, horror, supernatural on it, or otherwise. But there are, you know, 150 probably hard case crime novels at this point with some very famous names. I'll give you a few just to kind of give you the idea of some of the names that are on there. So you got people like Donald Westlake, Lawrence Block, Samuel Fuller, Dylan Strazen, Roger Zelazny, Max Allan Collins. So you get a real flavour of the kind of people that they're picking. And then over the more recent years, they've started bringing in some new names and adding to them, seeing if they have a kind of story that would fit this kind of mould and the very pulpy covers that I showed you. I got all three of Stephen King's hard case crime novels in this kind of wonderful box collection that has Later, Joyland and The Colorado Kid. Now, The Colorado Kid is a very, very short story, and out of that they spun an entire TV series eventually called Haven, which you might have seen, which was quite interesting, but it all came from this one kind of very short 150 mystery kind of story. And the other one, Later, is a ghost story about a young boy and then a young man who can see dead people, who can talk to ghosts. And this was done after The Sixth Sense, a very knowing nod to that in the story, and it mentions it in fact, and then it goes on and do something completely different and completely original. And there again, because it's Stephen King, you know it's going to be dark and twisted and interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And there again, it was super lean, and I got through it in a few days. So if I get through the rest of them, that's the last one on my holiday pile. So have you read any of these? Get in touch, let me know. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'll be back next week with another video.